Hi everybody, I am Rox De Leon and this is episode 5 of A Curious Character. This episode is a conversation with Ryan De Belen. Ryan and I went down the memory lane and chat about his journey from being an EC student in UP Diliman to doing a PhD researching how machine learning can be used in autism research. Hi Rai.
Hi, Rox. How are
Okay,
you?
so I'm doing well. How are you?
Yeah, good, thanks.
Yeah, okay, so let's get into it. Rai, you are currently a PhD student, right, at University of New South Wales, studying human-computer interaction. So, just before the call, we were just talking. I was just briefing you on how the conversation would flow. So let's try to make it very natural, or like basically just us talking, and then people would like eavesdrop what we're talking about. So that's kind of like the peg of this podcast. So yeah, as I mentioned, so you're currently doing your PhD in UNSW. And could you tell us a little bit about what you're currently doing research on?
Yeah, so thank you for that introduction. Again, yes, my name is Ryan, and I'm a PhD candidate at UNSW in Sydney, Australia. And my research focuses on how machine learning can be used in autism research. So, in that sense, it's an interdisciplinary area wherein we're also looking into the human computer interaction side. So, it's not just about developing models that would have like high accuracy in diagnosing autism, but also how clinicians can use this system for their diagnosis, basically. So, that's just the gist of what I'm doing right now.
Right. So yeah, that's very interesting, and I actually found it really interesting the first time you told me about it. Mostly because, as you know, I'm very interested in biomedical engineering and such. But you were my batchmate in UP Diliman, where we both took up electronics and communications engineering. And when you think about it, getting into like biomed track, it's kind of, I feel like it's deviating a little bit to the original ECE, like communications and such. So how did you get into that field from your ECE background? Because I think it's an interesting journey getting there.
Yeah, I have to agree that like doing electronics and communications engineering is really broad as well, in a sense that like you can do power electronics, you can do microelectronics, and in my case, I did digital signal processing. So my lab was DSP, which I think is closest to what I'm doing right now because it's all image processing and all those kind of stuff. But the journey that I did was after graduating ECE at UP Diliman. I actually worked as a freelance software engineer in a startup company, and then I wasn't really kind of like I didn't really enjoy doing what I was doing there, so I decided to go
Right.
back to UB and be a research associate in one of the labs, and that was the Ubiquitous Computing Lab headed by Dr. Rowella Tienza. And in that lab, we were doing like computer graphics and yeah, computer graphics basically. And then I worked there for a year, and then I moved to Sydney, Australia. And then I met this supervisor. It's a really long story, but just to like cut it a bit, yeah, I met this supervisor of mine who's been like supervising me for more than 3 years now. And when I was doing my master's with him, I was still doing healthcare in a sense, and ICT because I was
Mm-hmm.
developing assistive technology for older adults. But then the jump to like autism research, I was saying like, oh, for my PhD, I really want to do something that I think would be helpful for different people. So I guess that's how I got into autism research, and
Right.
we met with different collaborators so that we can make sure that what we're developing is actually going to be useful for them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a long
Yeah.
story.
Yeah. Going back, like moving down the memory lane a little bit and going back to way back in, was it 2014 that you started doing your undergrad thesis? It was 2014, right? Because you graduated 2015. 1 year
Um,
ahead of us. 1 year ahead
yeah,
of everyone.
I think it's been 5 years now. Yes,
Yeah.
I'm.
Yeah, almost six,
So
yeah,
yeah,
right? And then
2014.
back
Yeah,
when you were an undergrad, like choosing which undergrad lab to go to is kind of like a make or break decision. Because when you work there in that lab, like basically your training would just be based on, or at least back then, based on what that lab focuses on. So if you can still remember why you decided to join DSP, could you tell us what was your mindset back then?
I think I just really enjoyed Triple E 35 Signals and Systems course.
Uh-huh.
I think that's yeah. And then I thought, oh, DSB is doing a lot of those Triple E 35, then why not try it? And then um, to be honest, I haven't actually tried applying to other labs, so I just only tried DSP and I really liked it. So applying in DSP is that you get to have like different activities, and that's how
Mm.
they choose who like which applicants actually gets into the lab. So I just tried it, and it's all in MATLAB and like yeah different processing because I think DSP back then had three focus like image, speech, and audio processing. So during the tasks that each applicants had to do, we get to have a taste on what each area is doing. So I said like, oh, this is really interesting, and yeah, that's how I got into DSP.
Did you have a specific industry that you want to get into? Like at that time, did you know what you wanted to do after you graduate? Because I know you've been like you really want to do research and such, but like back then, what was your mindset? Like, were you still considering, oh, I think I want to go to industry afterward, or like, I know I'll do research, you know?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I think I just, yeah, I really enjoyed doing my undergraduate thesis back then because I spent a lot of time in the lab doing it. So I thought like, oh, I think I fell in love in research and found what I wanted to do back then. But then like having parents telling you like, oh, you should do like the board exam, and that's like doing the board exam for me. It's not really kind of DSP side of things because
Yeah.
like for the exam it's more of like what industry is really doing, but then what I was doing in DSP, I think at least what is in the Philippines, the industry there is not really focused in DSP. I'm not sure if it's changed, but yeah, I thought I really wanted to do research, and yeah, I think that's what I wanted to do. But it's I was too young, I guess, back then. I didn't
Yeah.
really know what to do. But I mean,
Yeah. Yeah, and touching a little bit on the board exam, like taking the board exam as an electronics engineer, I would definitely agree on that. Like like the purpose of a professional licensure exam in the Philippines really is to, honestly, I don't really know what it is for other than the government ID that you get. But it just goes to show how much or how huge the field of electrical engineering could go. And it actually goes beyond working for telecommunication companies and similar industries that are available in the Philippines. Basically, so after you graduated, you decide what made you decide to like go work for this startup, and like how did you find them and such? Do their goals align with at least what you wanted to learn more about after you graduate?
yeah, so what happened was that like there's this startup company. They're not really startup because I think it's been 8 years since they were established. I think 8 years when they actually approached DSP. So like the head of the team, I think the analytics team or something like that approached our lab heads, and they said like, oh, we're this company doing a lot of like digital signal processing and then machine learning, and then it kind of enticed me into applying to them, and then luckily I managed to get the job. And then that was the time when I was actually reviewing for my for the board exam basically. So it was a yeah um, they were saying stuff that actually made me want to be in that company.
Hmm.
And yeah, I didn't. Yeah, we signed an NDA, so I can't really say
Yeah.
what I did during those years that I was there. But yeah, they said it was all digital signal processing.
And did they live up to your expectation of them? Or at least,
Um,
was it worth it? Like you stayed there for almost like 10 months, right?
yes, 10 or 11 months, I think. Um, it was it was a good experience, I think, because I learned a lot, something that I would not have learned in the university back then. But I guess with the expectations that I had, especially with what they said during the interview, they didn't really live up to what those expectations were.
Right.
And that's also part of the reason why I left the company. I mean, they're really doing machine learning and like signal processing, but what they actually asked us to do was more of the data mining part of things.
Right.
And I do like agree that handling a more intensive part of the company, like doing the analysis part, would be a big task to give for a fresh employee in the company. And I think that's their secret sauce, if you may.
Right.
That like
Right.
you can't really give it out. But I thought that I would be able to work in that area of the analysis because that's what I really wanted to do. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, companies really do have their own vision, and I think it's just a matter of how do these companies' vision and mission fit with your personal career goals and how you want to like be better as a professional, or if their vision matches with what you want to do in your life, right? So after that experience with that startup, you decided to go back to UP and work with um, Dr. Atienza, right, for his research. So could you tell us a little bit about what enticed you to work with that research, and then what did you get out of it afterwards?
Yes. So yeah, just to clarify, yes. So I mean, the vision that the company had aligns with what I wanted to do, but then yeah, the job that I was getting was not what I really wanted to do. So that's the reason why I left. Had they given me the part of the job in the company that does the thing that I wanted to do, I wouldn't have left, I guess.
Right.
But yeah, the thing that enticed me to go back to UP and do research with Dr. Atienza was that like um, I think it was a great project to work on. So just to give a background, it was a government project funded by DOSD, and it's about digitizing human beings. So the premise was that we want to have or to rapidly create humanoid characters and motion in a 3D scene. So
Mhm.
you can just use any like scanning device, scan a person, and then you should be able to animate it quickly in a 3D environment. So that was the project. And yeah, so I applied for it. I actually heard about it from a friend of mine. And yes, I decided, no, why not give it a try? And then I sent an application and then I got into it. And I stayed there for a year and I learned a lot in that job as well. And thankfully, I managed to publish 2 papers related to the project, and I guess that kind of helped me
Yeah.
to go where I actually am right now because of
Yeah.
that papers. Because yeah,
That kind
it
of
was
make you
presented.
right. So
Yeah,
that kind of made you a stronger candidate for, would you say, for a grad school application?
yeah, I would say so. It really helped me because the my supervisor is actually the head of the conference that I presented
Mm-hmm.
to then. So he wasn't the head. I mean, he wasn't the chair of the conference back when I presented it. But then after 5 years, he was the chair. So I mean, he knows about that conference. So having read it for my application, I think it really helped, and it actually got me the like the chance to be interviewed in the position that I applied for. So we can go into the details how I actually
Right.
met my
Right.
supervisor now after that. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. So prior to meeting your supervisor, you first have to get into Australia. Can you tell us the story, or like how you got your first visa going to Australia? And
yes.
when?
So
What
my
was your timeline back then? Like it takes a while, right, to apply?
yes. So it's really interesting because like parents, like my mom, she's like, she always checks a lot of like opportunities that we could have. So there was a time when she went to UP, and I think that's when I got the admission letter back then, and we had a tour around the campus and the UP College of Engineering. And she saw this small like flyer in one of the, not like the notice boards in, or the job posts, something
Right.
like that. And then I think she took a photo, or like she just noted about it, saying like, um, engineers, like engineering graduates have this opportunity or visa to apply to Australia. And that was during the first
Twen-
year of my
As in
degree. I haven't,
2011?
yes, I think it was
Wow.
2011 back then. And then for some reason, she actually, like, I don't know, for some reason, she just realized that, like, oh, there was this post that I saw 3 years ago. I'm not sure if it's still up, but can you check it? Like, she kind of forced me to check it if it's still available. If that 2015, that year that I graduated. So I searched in the internet, and then I found out that it's still available. And then she said, like, why don't you apply? And I really didn't want to apply back then, because I was like, why would I leave the country? Like,
Yeah.
I'm doing what I wanted to do here, because I was doing research in UP back then. And I said, like, meh, why would I leave? That's fine. And then she kind of forced me into trying, and then I applied for it. And the visa is, I think it's valid for 1.5 years.
Yep.
But that
Mhm.
1.5 years won't start, unless, I mean, if you haven't arrived in the country yet, it wouldn't start yet.
Right.
But then
Yeah.
you only have 1 year to actually, like, delay that. So I tried my best to actually delay that, before coming in. So my visa would have started, even though I'm still in the Philippines, by the day I left the country. So it was just the right time that I left. So that's how I get how that's how I
Mhm.
got my visa, basically.
Yeah. Then now you were in Australia. Then what
Yep.
happened? Like, what were your goals initially going into Sydney?
Yes. So since everything seemed a bit rushed back then, I didn't really have concrete plans, to be honest. I was just like, oh yeah, I can try looking for a job, and I can do some research, or if I can pursue graduate studies. And my mom always like tells me back then that, like, if it fails, you can always go back to the Philippines. And I'm like, okay, that's fine then. I'll risk it. No, why not? So for a year, I was looking for, universities, and on the side also applying for jobs. And then I got this, invitation to be interviewed, basically, in UNSW. So it's the
Right.
lab where I am in right now. It was for, senior software engineer position, but then I'm not sure if I realized that I applied for a senior software engineer position back then, because I was just basically like blindly sending out my resumes, those kind of stuff. And, so I got into the interview, and then met. It was a panel of interviewees. One is from the head of the lab. One is from HR. One is, an employee in the lab. One is from the faculty itself. I think there were 5 people. And then, so during the interview, I felt like, oh, maybe I won't get it, when they said, like, oh, this is actually for a senior software engineer. And then after the interview, I just talked to the guy beside me, basically, and said, like, oh, if I didn't get the position, is there a chance for me to actually be part of the team by being a graduate student? And little did I know that the person beside me was actually the head of the lab, which is my
Wow.
supervisor right now. So had I known back then, I think that he was the lab head, I wouldn't have asked. I wouldn't have asked him, because I would be so terrified and afraid to ask about it. And I don't know. I just asked him, and we exchanged emails, and then there you go. I started my master's, with his, as my supervisor, and and then now I'm doing my PhD under his supervision as well. So the story behind it.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I think it's also part of like, I don't know if it's like an Asian thing that you're sometimes scared, quote unquote, to ask or just, chase opportunities or something, but then we get to learn to be, more assertive as we experience, like as our world gets bigger, right? So, when you took your master's, so how was I'm curious to learn or know how the research or project selection was, because you um, got into biomed, sort of, at least that's how I see it. So how did that came to be?
Yes, so I think our lab is in a weird position, I think. So just a quick background. So it's like called Expanded Perception Interaction Center, and it's sitting in art and design basically. But it's a shared resource across the university. So different people from different faculties actually go there and like do their stuff with us, and they can use all the resources that our center has. And during that time, I was actually the only student, so there are no other projects because it was relatively newly established lab. So I think it was actually the second year that that lab was established when I got there. So the research is mostly like it wasn't driven by any project or any funding that needs to be done, at least in my perspective, because I didn't know the politics behind how it's being run. But um, the research that I wanted to do back then was AI, and then also like doing computer graphics on the side and something that's helpful for people. So we decided to go into the track wherein, oh, why not use mixed reality or like HoloLens, for example. Like you have these smart glasses, and then you can help older adults navigate through the house. So you use computer vision basically to detect objects and find obstacles along the way. And then, in a sense, it should be able to help them if they're, for example, losing their sight or they get forgetful sometimes. And then, yeah, that was the whole master's that I did with that. So I did some design workshops with older adults, and then I let them try the device and then invite them to do some experiments. Yes, that
How
was
long
my.
was this? How long was this master's program?
Yeah, so I did a master of philosophy, which is a like in our like in the university we have three masters. So you can do masters by coursework, which I guess what's mostly in the Philippines, at
Yeah.
least in UP. So for 2 years you just take courses that's related to electrical engineering, for example. And we have masters by research, which is 1 year you have this course and then 1 year to do your thesis. But the path that I took was Master of Philosophy, which is a transition into PhD. So that 2 years was purely research. So you only took, I think I only took one course that's about research foundations, and there is one elective that you can take that's related to your research. But the rest, it's all like supervisor driven or like self driven on where you want to go. So that was the master's that I took, 2 years.
So basically, by the time that you enrolled in your master's program, you already knew that you wanted to do that. That is leading to you doing a PhD. Is that's what I'm hearing? Is that correct?
Yes. So I thought back then that although I did a research position under like Dr. Atienza's supervision in the Philippines, I thought I still need like some training years before actually undertaking a PhD. So I thought, oh, maybe do a Master of Philosophy for 2 years and then do a PhD basically. Although
Right.
during my first year, I was actually offered to upgrade to a PhD, but then I thought I wasn't really happy with the topic that I chose for my
Mm-hmm.
master. So I guess it was also like a way for me to just figure out, oh, what do I really want to do for my PhD. And I guess that's what one of the most important things that you should consider when doing a PhD. Like, pursue a topic that really interests you.
Interests you, yeah. And then now leading to your PhD, how was that topic selection? Could you talk to us a little bit about the topic selection and how it works in Australian university?
Yes. So during my last semester for my master's, I was already discussing with my supervisor, like, oh, I want to do a PhD, but I want to make sure that it's something that's related to medical area as well, and mostly focusing on like AI. So what happened was, like, my supervisor said, oh, I know someone from the CSE, so CSE, Computer Science and Engineering, because again, we're sitting in art and design, although like my supervisor is also like a computer scientist. But so we met with this supervisor, which is, yeah, well, she's my supervisor right now as well. So we met with her and we talked about potential projects that I might I might be interested in.
Yeah.
And one that really like touched my heart, I guess, was the autism research. She was saying like, oh, I have collaborators from UNSW Medicine looking into using machine learning to detect autism, and it's also video analytics, so it's more in the digital signal processing side. So after that, I decided, okay, so I'll write my research proposal, and then I sent it to them, and then reviewed, and then I applied, and then I got in.
How detailed was this research proposal? Did you have to really have an idea on what the output or like what your dissertation is going to be like? Or yeah, how detailed is it basically?
Yeah, so it's similar. It's similar to the Master of Philosophy proposal. So since I had this prior experience in writing a proposal before, because yeah, my Master of Philosophy degree required it as well. So I kind of had an idea on what it should look like. And the UNSW website also had that resource wherein like all of the research proposals should have at least this sections. So like basic introduction, research questions, methodology, and like literature review and the conclusion. Although it's, like, you're not sure if the methodology that you'll be using is really what's going to be like. So I guess you continuously refine it. And I'm in my first year of PhD. So I'm going to have my confirmation next month. So during my first year, I was constantly refining my proposal based from what I've read. Because initially you would have this hypothesis, and then
Right.
only to find out that like, oh, I read this literature and then I should change my proposal. So yeah, it's 1,500 to 2,000 word document.
I see.
Proposal. So it's kind of detailed in a sense.
And that's even before you formally start your PhD?
Yes, so that
Is
was
it?
part
Okay.
of the admission process basically. So you need to write that proposal,
Ah,
and that's why I think when it comes to Australian PhD, in a sense, it's more like person driven or the applicant driven. It's really you who's driving the research, because
right,
it's you who knows what direction you would want to take, as
right.
compared to, I guess, other universities or other in other countries wherein yeah
Yeah,
yeah
we've talked about this a lot offline, like how US school applications are very different with Australian and also in the UK, and it really varies. If someone is looking into a PhD program, it really varies per country. The process for getting a PhD, like for the US applications, like I've told you about this, like in the US, you could talk to. It differs actually. I found out recently that it actually varies per university. Like in other universities, you can do like a rotation program, and then from there choose which lab you want to be part of based on the research interest that you currently have. Whereas other universities would actually require you to talk to a professor before you get admitted. but then that professor's decision is not really gonna be a make or break decision for the university to admit you as a student, because overall I think they say they evaluate applicants based on their holistically basically. So that's a pretty interesting difference between, yeah, Australia, UK, and the US. So
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
sorry.
no, I was
Yeah, so I
just
guess
gonna
yeah,
go
you
ahead.
can go. No, you
No,
can go.
it's a different topic, so you could maybe wrap up that difference
Yeah,
between PhD
I
programs.
guess for those people who really want to try Australia, first you need to contact a potential supervisor because the university would require you to at least have talked to a person in the university who's
Mm-hmm.
willing to actually supervise you. So for your application, you need to attach some kind of letter, like correspondence with a university lecturer or professor that they're willing to supervise you and that you have actually made and refined your proposal in supervision with them. So that's a really important thing. I think that's also a hard part of it because you need to catch the supervisor's attention so you can start like blind emailing, but you can't really expect them to like reply quickly. But I was so lucky that I was in a meeting with the supervisor with my supervisor now, and it was a face-to-face meeting that I had, and he was fine with it. So yeah, that's a good
Yeah,
I think. Just
yeah.
a
Maybe
good.
before I like move on to like the next part, um, I would just like to wrap up a little bit with, because you mentioned that you have to write the proposal and all that. Does that mean, like, for your PhD, do you still take courses to maybe if you still need to improve on this specific expertise? Like, do you have that capability or that ability to take, classes to, practice or something?
Yeah, so I think and all PhD students need to take at least one research foundation course, so the basics of research, how to write a
Mm-hmm.
proposal, how to conduct literature review, those kind of stuff. But since I did it during my master's, I asked them to like if I can waive it so that I don't need to take that course again, and they were fine with it. But when it comes to any course that's related to your research that you would want to take, you can audit a course. You just need to tell the postgraduate coordinator about it and also talk to the lecturer in charge to be able to sit in and audit the class. But then, yeah, like if you're actually attending the whole course and there's only a certain portion that you would want to focus on in your research, then I guess you can like teach yourself. I don't know. But
Right.
yeah, that's part of the research in Australia, I would say. We're in like, yeah, you try to hone yourself, but that's a double-edged sword as well because, if you're kind of lost, then it might be hard to know like which subjects to actually study on the side.
Right. Yeah. And I guess one positive of that is that experience trains you to be better, to be more independent, and like really trains you to be a good researcher, that you can direct whatever hypothesis or problem you're trying to solve. And it only takes like 3 years, right? Ideally to
It's
get a
4 years.
PhD, or 4 years. Okay. So
Yeah.
now you're in your second year?
I'm
No, or
first year towards the end of my first year, so yeah,
towards the
almost
end
like
of your first year. So in the past few months, how has it been? Like, what was your like day in the life looking at like as a PhD?
yeah. I guess I'll start off by saying that like it's not the best time to actually start a PhD during a pandemic. So I started my PhD March 2020, which is what, 6 months ago.
Exactly the
So
time the pandemic started.
yes, exactly the month when the pandemic started. And I think it was like only a few weeks after I started when the university decided that, oops, we're going to close down because there's lockdown, those kind of stuff. So it was a bit tough, but then I guess I was a bit driven because I thought, oh, this is really something that I want to do because
Mhm.
my master's, I'd be honest with it, I didn't really enjoy my topic that much. So I guess it's a driving force for me now because I'm working on something that I really want. So my day would be going to uni around 8:30. I just walk to uni in 20 to 25 minutes, and then I start working at 9 to like 1, then have my lunch, and then do a quick workout, and then go back to the lab, and then go home around 6 p.m. So that's my morning daily routine, I'd say. But that's a month ago because the university just started reopening. But during the lockdown, I was basically stuck in the room, in my house and doing my research little by little, and having some morning walks around the block if I feel a bit bored or
Yeah.
unproductive. Yeah.
Can I just say that your schedule is like the epitome of a good grad student? Other grad students would just like stay over time in the lab and like work 60 hours, 70 hours a week. So I feel like having a good routine, at least like you were able to embody it. And are you able to maintain it at least for most of the time?
Yes, so I'm slowly building, yeah, a good habit of doing that. Like, I'll be honest, I wasn't that like consistent back then, especially during the pandemic. But then I think the goal was just to keep going
Right.
and keep doing the routine just in case. When it comes to that postgraduate student staying up late in the lab, like sometimes I think it's
Necessary?
burning me out. I've done that during my master's degree, and it was good because like you get to do stuff, a lot of stuff. But like I think that's also a part of the Australian culture is that there's work-life balance here. um yeah, so I see my supervisor like just I don't know if I'm like taking up too much time explaining it, but just a context. So my
Right.
supervisor did his PhD in Japan. So the
Yeah.
culture there was like
Mhm.
apparently he
Work
starts
hard.
working at
Yeah.
6 a.m. because the main premise is that you should be there before your supervisor and until your supervisor leaves. But the thing about his supervisor is that like I think he starts at 7 and then leave around 7. So he was
Ooh.
telling me that like, oh, I'm in the lab 6 a.m. until like for example 8 to 9 p.m. So whenever he sees me in the lab, he's like, "Oh, why are you still here?" Or like, because it's the Australian culture to not be like in the lab for that late. But sometimes he jokes around and said like, "You're already going home." Like in Japan, we used to stay until like 9 p.m. And then yeah. So I guess it's really different as well
Yeah.
in
It's
context.
kind of like a cultural thing in addition to like how you try to build a good habit and just get things focusing on what things you get done over how long you've worked for the same amount of output, right? So it seems like you're having like a great time doing your PhD and all. So I know it could be a difficult to, or yeah, it could be challenging to think of one thing, but what do you think is the best experience or like the most interesting experience that, or exciting experience that you've had so far
Mm, in what's is
in
it
your,
like
like, it depends on how you want to take it. Like, what's the most exciting thing that you've experienced throughout your, PhD or research journey so far?
I think I'll go to the most unconventional thing. I would not say the most exciting thing is like publishing a paper, those kind of stuff, but being able to actually volunteer in a conference. So, usually a researcher would go to a conference to present and, like network with researchers. But I go to the most unconventional part and say, like, I did my fair bit of like volunteer job in a conference, which is the biggest like computer graphics conference in the world, and there were 16,000 attendees. and I volunteered for that. And I think it's a unique experience to be able to connect with students. Yeah, that's exciting because I think if I just say like, oh, being able to present in a conference, it's like
Right.
a common thing that any PhD student would say. But yeah, I guess being able to network and just
Hmm.
chill in a conference
Just meet
and
people and not worry about presenting your own paper.
yeah, I think that's a good experience that I've
Yeah.
experienced.
Could you touch a little bit on the topic of collaboration? Like right now, you're collaborating with, is it an MD, PhD in neuroscience, like psychiatry or something, right? So how
Yeah,
is
so
it so far?
yeah, so I did collaboration during my master's as well with the local community center to be able to like schedule any workshops with older adults. So that's another part. But right now, I guess that's where I'm going to focus on. So I'm collaborating with a lot of doctors in UNSW psychiatry and Prince of Wales hospitals and other hospitals as well to be able to conduct my research. And it's really fun to have like different viewpoints in research, I guess, because we tend to be siloed in our own
Yeah,
research area, and we don't really like. I guess how do I say it? Like, it's good to collaborate because yeah, it gives different perspectives. And for example, in
for
computer
sure.
science or engineering, you mostly focus on the tech side of things, but then I don't know. I think I'm not sure if I have not taken any elective that I should have taken in UP Diliman, but I maybe there's entrepreneurship maybe, but I think you took that one, didn't you?
I did, yeah. But
Yeah,
it's kind of
so
different. Like it's different if you actually work closely with, say, a physician or something, rather than just observing or doing research on what they do.
yeah, so I mean I was leading in a way that like I think my upbringing, at least in I'm not generalizing, it's just my own um, experience is that I didn't really think of actually how do I say it? I didn't think of the user who's gonna use my
Yeah,
technology. Basically,
yeah,
I was just mostly focused because my undergrad thesis was about um, automatic speaker diarization. So basically, you have a continuous audio stream, and I don't want to get into the details of
hmm,
it, but basically the way you quantify the performance is just by a number. But I guess an important aspect of it is how will that translate into a user's perspective in a way.
hmm,
And I guess that's what I was lacking. So in a collaborative environment, I think that's when you actually have a time to think about those kind of things. So in my own research right now, I was initially thinking that like I should include clinicians, physician who's gonna use my
hmm,
system and make sure that it's usable, it's useful for them, not just quantifying, oh, my AI is able to detect autism at this percentage.
right,
I guess it goes hand in hand. Like although the system might not be that high in diagnosing, then if physicians think it's valuable, if they can see the use of it, then yeah, I guess it's better than having a system that's 100% accurate but not
right,
usable for
right.
clinicians. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely hear what you're saying. That I could attest to that. Like as an engineer, sometimes we get too excited with the technical details of things, and we forget that, oh, okay, maybe this is gold standard or like state of the art technology, but the question of, is this going to be used by the intended users of this innovation? Sometimes we do forget that. So it's good to be reminded that, or it's good to be reminded that, okay, we're actually doing research for a purpose, and getting those feedback from the actual users, or getting a different perspective of how it could potentially make the world a better place, if you want to say it that way, is
Yeah.
definitely a
So
good training to have.
yeah, I just give a quick example. So there's like an increasing number of papers publishing in autism. No, it's actually computer science arena. And they were saying like, oh, we're using eye tracking, for example, to diagnose autism. But then when I actually like talked to clinicians who also did some eye tracking study, and the eye tracking data that they have collected, that's what I'm analyzing right now. The
Mm-hmm.
clinicians actually were saying that, like, to be honest, I would not use a system that uses eye tracking because in my practice, it's really hard for me to let the kids look at the camera or like the screen and
Right.
have their eye tracking like data collected. So I guess, why are computer scientists and engineers saying that like, oh, I can use this system and it's this accurate, when clinicians are saying that like, well, like it's really hard to collect data, like, have them sit still because, kids with autism tend to have um, less attention span. So yeah, they say like, oh, it'd be better if we approach it in a different way. So I guess, yeah, collaboration is really important in this sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. So maybe to starting like wrap up a little bit. So if you could reflect on how or look back and see how you have changed or your perspectives have changed so far throughout the years, what would you say like, or how would you describe how you like grew to be a better researchers? And then maybe end with, since my interest is personally in biomedical engineering, is that if there is something or advice that you would give to a student who would like to get into biomed or pursue a career trajectory similar to yours, like, yeah, maybe talk about that a little bit.
Wait, so
So
this is
first,
a two-part
so
question, is it? Yeah.
yeah, those are two different questions. So first, maybe
Yeah.
reflect on how you've grown so far, like, yeah, how your perspectives have changed throughout the years to where you currently are right now. Yeah, maybe that one first.
Okay. So I guess I'll start off with saying that I was really uncomfortable at first because again, I was in art and design. And coming from an electronics engineering background and be told that like, oh, you're doing design, it was counterintuitive for me. And but throughout the years, I have come to realize that design is not the design that I thought it was. Like designing is not just drawing or doing stuff, but designing a technology that is really helpful for the benefit of the users and that's useful and those kind of stuff. So I guess in that sense I've grown into thinking that like technology is not just about the numbers and how accurate it is. It's also about, yeah, making it usable and useful for people and making sure that users can trust it as well. So I guess it's the design side of me now talking more in the engineering side. Yeah, so I think that's how I've grown, and I guess, yeah, it's more independent now
Right.
when it comes to the research directions. So my supervisor always tells me that like, no, we can't tell you what you're gonna do. So we're just here to like say that, oh, you might be like going to the wrong direction, but the main driver of the research is you. So I guess that's one of the important changes that,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's awesome, and that's something that you could actually make use of, like, in your career later on. So yeah, maybe we can end with this one question. If there's one thing that you would tell someone who wants to pursue a career or a career trajectory similar to yours, maybe someone who would like to do a PhD or do research on in the biomedical engineering space a little bit, what would it be?
Hmm. So I guess um
Or someone who would like to get into AI in biomed. Is it kind of, does that like praise what you're currently doing right now? Or am I being like, oh, that's not it?
well, yeah, that's that. yeah, I'm using eye gaze data and then video data sets as well to detect autism. So I'm using AI for that. But I think when I guess two things that I'd say. If you're gonna do PhD, I think the research trajectory, like for someone who wants to do research, the trajectory that that they should follow. It's really hard to say.
Yeah.
But okay, I think I'll start off with saying like one, it's important to look for a supervisor that's gonna be there to always support you,
Mm-hmm.
because technically you'll be working with them for 4 years, and having someone who's just gonna leave you behind and that you like, not, I don't know. Yeah, but be sure to look for a supervisor. But I guess that's also hard to know. So to know at first that they're a good supervisor, maybe talk to people who's been their supervising,
Yeah.
and see how that supervisor was during their candidature. That's a good thing to follow. Second is that you need to make sure that what you're doing is what you really want to do. Because I had this problem before, and yeah, during my masters, I didn't really enjoy my topic, and it was a bit of a stretch for me because you're constantly working on something that's not inspiring you. So for my PhD, at least now, I'm really I can say I can dedicate more time doing this because that's what I'm mostly passionate about. For the trajectory, um, yeah, I think it's about upskilling yourself as well. Like, you need to learn to be more independent and know. I don't know if I'm preachy, but I don't know. I'm not sure if I am in the right position to like say what they should do,
Yeah.
because yeah, I'm still navigating through this entire thing as well. But I'd say, yeah, be independent and just keep going.
Any
And
advice for undergrads?
for undergrads,
Because so I'm asking this because if you're when you're still an undergrad, especially in electrical engineering, right? Sometimes um, courses can be just so difficult that you don't know what you're studying, why you're studying it, and something. So maybe if you could, give some tips or words of, I don't know, as someone who has gone through that process to undergrads, how to
I'm
survive or succeed in electrical engineering.
it's a really interesting question because looking back, I think I really enjoyed undergrad because that's when, yeah. Hmm. Wait, it's a
Maybe think
hard
of
question.
think of the time when we were studying Triple 41 and we would, you know, have group studies, and then others would stay up all night, others would sleep, and then how that paid off later on. Like, what did you learn from those difficult experiences or really terrifying moments that we've had? I don't know if you had terrifying moments, but I did.
I think it really prepares you. Uh, I'd say at least in UP, it really prepared us to what is out there. If not, it's a bit more terror actually, because I think, I don't know, UP is known to be that terror university wherein like people cry after exams and stuff. But I can assure you that it's all worth it because it like those pressure that you feel during your course, like yeah, your courses might be like, yeah, yeah, it's really terrifying, but it prepares you. I don't know if I answered your
Yeah,
question,
yeah, yeah.
but
I think it's an interesting take on that issue, or on that, like getting a different perspective. So yeah, well, I think we can wrap up, like end on that note, and good luck with PhD, and I hope, like, you get to work more or collaborate more with the doctors, and that this thesis that, or dissertation that you're currently doing actually be something that will be used by patients, maybe not in the near term or like in the long run, be something that could actually, revolutionize, if I should say that, um, autism, ASD, right? Yeah.
Yeah, well, I
Well,
hope so too. So that's my goal, because I mean, over the years, it's all subjective the way people, diagnose autism, and I think it's the right time. I mean, yeah, the CS side of things, the engineering side of things, I think it's ready than ever to actually
yeah.
be able to quantify, in a sense, behavioral perspective. Yeah, quantify this kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
thanks, Rai.